Well, have you heard of DEI? It stands for diversity, equity, and inclusion. The problem is that it's anything but that. But it is the new deity in town that all must worship. But it appears that some businesses are no longer keen on it. Let's check it out. Okay, so just in case you haven't heard of DEI, diversity is identity politics. It's defined by your sexuality, gender, race, colour, disability, all called intersectionality. You're a victim. Inclusion means we include everyone, but it's based on their definition. The language defined by the left, so their definition of marriage, gender, sexuality, decolonisation, environmentalism, critical theory based on certain racial groups being victims and white people being oppressors. And equity is, well, it's Marxism 101. Everyone must have the same outcome, irrespective of effort, talent, character, whatever. But what DEI actually is this. It's deception because it's confusion around gender, sexuality, and it also disunity, racial conflict. It's inequality, special rights for special groups, the groups that I listed above earlier, and exclusion, cancel culture if your views don't align with the new woke virtues. And according to the media, the expectation is that every business, every charity, every organisation should adopt this philosophy, especially after Black Lives Matter arose from the death of George Floyd in 2020, which we'll come back to. But the DEI narrative seems to be slowly dying. And let's look at some examples. So agricultural equipment, massive company in the US, manufacturer John Deere, released a statement distancing itself from DEI and affirming that it will no longer support external social or cultural awareness events like pride parades, despite previously describing DEI as one of its highest priorities. John Deere's global policy against discrimination and harassment includes examples of harassment prohibited by the company, including 1. Comments or jokes, kidding or teasing based on a person's sex, gender, sexual orientation, or gender identity or expression. 2. Sex-related or gender-related language or offensive comments that reflect sex or gender stereotypes. And 3, any unoffensive or unwelcome conduct based on sex, gender, sexual orientation, or gender identity or expression. You'll note that there's no rules around teasing or kidding or language or unwelcome conduct related to race or disability or physical features, or maybe if you have a stutter. In a 2022 annual report, John Deere listed diversity, equity and inclusion as one of its highest priorities, embedding diversity, equity and inclusion principles into all aspects of how they run. The company's board of directors is 36% female and nearly 20% African American. DEI is the only global performance metric upon which all salaried employees are evaluated. The company was committed to grow relationships with disadvantaged business enterprises, such as those owned by veterans, members of the LGBTQ community, and individuals with disabilities. And in a statement released by the manufacturer, it said it prioritizes internal policies that more closely align our business strategy to, wait for it, meet the needs of the customers. Wow, how unique. And to that end, the company announced a series of commitments. They're no longer going to participate in parades, festivals, woke ones basically, that their resource groups are going to focus exclusively on professional development. Wow. They're going to audit all training materials and policies to make sure there's no socially motivated, i.e. woke messaging. And they're going to reaffirm that they're not going to worry about pronouns and diversity quotas. And we fundamentally believe that a diverse workforce enables us to best meet our customers' needs and we will continue to track and advance the diversity of our organisation. Have a watch of this little video clip news item and hear some of the nonsense concerns of the DEI specialists, the academic wonks.
After weeks of online pressure from a conservative political commentator, John Deere announced changes to its diversity policies, saying in part it will no longer participate in external, social, or cultural awareness parades, festivals, or other events. It's also reviewing training materials and policies. It's unclear what events Deere participates in now or how trainings might change.
Training is the most common active DEI program. It doesn't do much to change what the workforce looks like.
Frank Dobbin is a Harvard sociology professor. He's studied corporate diversity programs for decades.
Silence is violence!
He says in the wake of the 2020 murder of George Floyd and the resurgence of the Black Lives Matter movement, companies started reevaluating and looking at practices to promote diversity. Now, there's a counter-movement against it.
You know, we have conservative thinkers affecting how investors are thinking about this, with the threat that, you know, customers for these in this sector may not be on board with DEI programming.
In its statement, Deere says it was listening to feedback, saying, quote, "We consistently prioritize internal policies that more closely align with our business strategy to meet the needs of our customers."
These politicized attacks on DEI are absolutely bad for business.
Sean Harper is a business professor at the University of Southern California. He says diversity policies aren't about politics and should focus on the business aspect.
John Deere has to customize and situate its DEI efforts for the environments in which they are located, why it is important to invest in programs for girls and young women to get them into farming, why it is helpful to our nation to ensure that Black farmers and other farmers of color have equitable access to equipment.
Just last month, Deere agreed to pay over $1 million in back wages after alleged hiring discrimination. Harper thinks that will be more common. Meanwhile, both professors think less people from minority groups will want to work for the company now, and that this won't significantly increase Deere's customer base.
Maybe the top 5% of conservatives are going to make their tractor decision based on this. My guess is that most people are just going to make their decision based on, you know, who their local supplier is.
Both expect attacks on DEI to continue. But as the pendulum continues to swing between two poles, Dobbin predicts company diversity policies will ultimately end up somewhere in the middle.
It's just conservatives to blame. Well, it's not actually, as I'll show you. But, you know, John Deere are going to focus on all customers and all farmers, rather than just virtue signal on a specific group as per the DEI model. Sounds excellent. Now, John Deere isn't the first farm-related company to cut back. In late June, a big company in the US called Tractor Supply announced it would no longer submit data to the leftist Human Rights Campaign or adhere to DEI goals. And now, as I said, it's not the only company, because Zoom laid off a DEI team earlier this year, saying it would instead work with existing external consultants. According to the business website Bloomberg, Google and Meta, which was Facebook, also made cuts to DEI following their 2020 pledges. And the media outlet CNBC reported that between 2020 and 2021, so after George Floyd and Black Lives Matter, DEI job postings increased by nearly 30%. But last year, they declined by 44%. So things are changing. And in this article, it says Microsoft had been one of the companies that pledged to spend millions of dollars to hire more people of color. In June 2020, the Microsoft CEO sent an email to employees saying the company had committed to take action to help address racial injustice and inequity, and unequivocally believe that Black Lives Matter. But the recent email reportedly said the DEI team was eliminated due to changing business needs. True systems change work associated with DEI programs everywhere are no longer business critical or smart as they were in 2020, said the email. And even left-wing woke CNN admits that it's happening. In this article, it says high-profile incidents such as Disney's clash with Florida Governor Ron DeSantis over the Don't Say Gay bill and Bud Light's partnership with transgender influencer Dylan Mulvaney kicked off a right-wing backlash. The resulting controversies highlighted the fragility of corporate activism in the face of conservative opposition. Economic pressures, including higher interest rates and reduced customer spending, compounded the issue. Companies reverted to prioritising profits over social change, retreating from their activist positions. To quote CNN contributor and rockstar journalist Kara Swisher, as it turned out, it was capitalism after all. And Bud Light used to be the number one beer. It's fallen to number 3. It's lost more than $1 billion over their virtue signalling and wokeness. And US commentator Dr. Michael Brown, who we've interviewed before, says in his article in the Christian Post, last year things got so extreme with Target's tuck bathing suits for males who identify as females, including children, that as CNN reported in May, Target is limiting the number of stores that will sell LGBTQ-themed merchandise for Pride Month this year, following a boycott from right-wing activists last year that took a toll on the brand's bottom line. CBS recently reported that this year, public-facing Pride campaigns at some of the world's largest brands were quieter than usual. At other companies that previously had them, they were completely absent. Fewer public campaigns means less visibility, which LGBTQ advocates and consumers in the community say can be dangerous in myriad ways. Now, the Wall Street Journal recently published an article about how the consulting firm McKinsey announced in 2015 that it had found a link between profits and executive racial and gender diversity. In other words, of being woke to DEI. And this research was used by investors, lobbyists and regulators to push for more women and minority groups on boards and to justify investing in companies that appointed them. Within 5 years, there was a massive shift in how many companies hired and conducted their business. In 2020, the DEI ethos metastasized, I think is how you say that word. Companies not only embraced the racial reckoning, they began to implement full-scale and almost certainly illegal racial quotas. The McKinsey study, gave corporations air cover to promote ideologically motivated diversity programs while saying that it was simply good for business. But it wasn't. It just made the companies woke. And the truth soon came out. And in this article, as you can see here, it actually says, according to the Wall Street Journal, academics have tried to repeat McKinsey's findings and failed, concluding there is, in fact, no link between profitability and executive diversity. The only thing that the study found was that profitable companies ended up with more diversity after they'd succeeded, not before. That makes sense in a lot of ways. Big companies that are highly profitable could more easily afford to simply promote DEI with fewer consequences. The authors of the McKinsey study say they've found a way to prove correlation between DEI programs and profitability, but even that is in doubt. The Wall Street Journal said that McKinsey won't release the names of the companies it used for the study, and it was unable to show benefits from diversity on a large range of metrics. There was just no link at all between diversity and corporate success. And it also showed this summary. McKinsey's research figures, first in BlackRock's references for supporting a board diversity target, said, where are we? McKinsey's research, for supporting a board diversity target of 30% in its proxy voting guidelines. And then down the bottom there, it has been cited by dozens of campaign groups pushing for rules to support consideration of social issues by pension funds and others too. BlackRock, there's a name for you, According to the journal cited, the study is evidence that diversity created financial benefits. BlackRock has gotten into hot water over its corporate practices and has announced that it is stepping away from environmental, social, and government investing. Paradoxically, the DEI industry is about creating a conformity of worldviews where every institution, every CEO, every employee is roped into the same left-wing beliefs and swims in the same direction. Those who dissent are punished and ostracized. But it's getting harder for businesses to justify their ideological commitments when they are bleeding money. Well, that is all true, isn't it? I mean, try going into a DEI meeting and reading the Bible verses on marriage or on being created male or female, or that we are all one in the sight of the Lord. And it is widespread. Have a look at this coverage.
Turns out caving to the woke mob isn't worth it when it affects your wallet. Shareholders at dozens of big companies from GE to UPS are voting on proposals that go against everything related to DEI and ESG as companies look to distance themselves from politics.
According to new data, through the end of last month, shareholders have voted on 70 measures opposing ESG, that's environmental, social, governance initiatives at S&P 500 companies this year. It's a stark increase from previous years.
Let's bring in...
Wow. Yeah, it's a 10 times increase, actually. You know, things are getting interesting when tennis great Martina Navratilova, an out and proud lesbian, can say, I know I'm on the right side of history in calling so-called trans women athletes cheats. And this is part of the issue because it started out as gays and lesbians, but then under critical theory and intersectional theory of victim groups, you had to start including other so-called victim groups, oppressed groups. So that means a broader agenda of anti-racism, anti-sexism, anti-transphobia, decolonization, asexuals, bisexuals, pansexuals, and you had to support tearing down prisons and borders and defunding the police and denouncing cis white men. It became quite exhausting and comical. I mean, just watch the Te Pāti Māori or the Green Party to see how extreme it can get. And the pride flag of the original distorted 6 colours of the rainbow, not the traditional 7, now has pink and blue for trans and black and brown for racial justice and non-binary and people of colour in the LGBT movement, and the purple circle now for intersex. Now, we have seen declines in pride and DEI even in New Zealand. For example, we know that there was an almost 20% drop in the number of schools doing Pride Week in schools this year, down to just 10% of all schools, despite strong media and even Ministry of Education marketing and cajoling. Schools want to get on with educating, not indoctrinating. And we've noticed that companies have gone a little quieter around LGBT's Pink Shirt Day and Pride Month of February here in New Zealand. And you can actually go to our website. Some of our DEI policies for companies on our website, wokeup.nz. As our website says, DEI is fixated on differences in race, gender, sexual orientation, and disability. Devotees claim that DEI will enhance organisations by making them more diverse. DEI undermines meritocracy as it encourages the hiring and promotion of employees based on their race, sex, gender, or other acceptable characteristics rather than on their skill, competence, and work ethic. And there's this 40-40-20 drive, 40% men, 40% women, and 20% other. Now, here's an excellent story from Fox News, which says Alexander Wang, who founded Scale AI in 2016, shared on social media that his company had formalized an MEI hiring policy, that is, merit, excellence, and intelligence, in apparent contrast to DEI. Scale is a meritocracy and we must always remain one, Wang wrote in a post on recently. Hiring on merit will be a permanent policy at Scale. Now, it's a 6-year startup and it's currently worth $14 billion. And this is Wang, and he says he's received several questions about who he hires, how he hires. He says talent is our number one input metric. I think of our guiding principle as MEI, merit, and excellence and intelligence. That means we hire only the best person for the job. We seek out and demand excellence, and we unapologetically prefer people who are very smart. He said that they treat candidates as individuals, not representative of groups. We do not unfairly stereotype, tokenize, or otherwise treat anyone as a member of a demographic group rather than as an individual. We believe that people should be judged by the content of their character. There is a mistaken belief that meritocracy somehow conflicts with diversity. I strongly believe no group has a monopoly on excellence. We will not pick winners and losers based on someone being the right or wrong race, gender, and so on. It should be needless to say, and yet it needs saying, doing so would be racist and sexist, not to mention illegal. And interestingly, his post won praise from several Silicon Valley business leaders. Well, how refreshing. There is hope. Now, just before I finish, there was a feature story in the New Zealand Herald just over the weekend backing up exactly what I was saying. And it was entitled Woke Culture, Why Millennials and Gen Zers Are Facing a Backlash from the Left. Let me just read you just a little bit of it. Victoria, a mother, is a feminist Green Party supporter with socialist centre-left views. The mother of two idealistic Gen Z daughters, Victoria is an entrepreneur who has built her company culture on diversity, equity and inclusion. That's exactly the kind of wokeism pilloried by many of those with ideological views that lean harder right. But Victoria isn't the only one of her liberal friends who thinks the pendulum has swung too far, making young people overly sensitive to other points of view and out of touch with reality. Originally signifying an awareness of important issues, especially related to social and racial justice, describing someone as woke has been co-opted in certain circles as a term of both ridicule and abuse. At the last election, ACT leader David Seymour campaigned on ending Labour's reign of woke terror and made headlines in May for calling out sushi as woke food that's inappropriate content for a government-subsidised school lunchbox. Woke Up NZ, a website launched last month by lobby group Family First, uses a scale of woke ratings, non-woke, woke light and extreme woke in its stated mission to expose the New Zealand businesses promoting woke leftist ideologies. A profile on each company lists its official policies and public commentary related to issues such as abortion, critical race theory, gender ideology, LGBTQ, climate change, and a commitment to DEI. Like most of the white, middle-class parents in her social circle, Victoria has little in common with ACT or the conservative Christian base of Family First. But even she finds herself struggling with uber-woke Gen Zers and millennials who feel triggered by the use of certain words or when someone merely disagrees with them. What annoys her most is the shallowness of virtue signalling on social media, where it's important to be seen aligning with the right causes, from mental health and the trans community to Black Lives Matter and the war in Gaza. It's a fascinating read, and it's probably why those on the left definitely didn't like our Woke Up website. But the tide is turning, not only on the transgender issue and chemicalising and confusing our children around gender. DEI totally deserves to die. Hopefully, New Zealand companies are listening to what's becoming a worldwide trend.